I've had quite a few people come to ask me how to mod this weapon, how to mod that weapon. Well, it's a fair question, but players need to understand Warframe weapon modding is pretty basic and not complicated at all. Just follow the big three principle: base damage, elemental damage, and critical damage. And they are part of the core foundation of any weapon build. Base damage multiplies your total weapon's base damage. Elemental damage adds a new value to your total damage, which is multiplied by your base damage mods, or arcane. And crit damage multiplies your damage when you land a critical hit, which even affects damage over time. And you add the other modifiers like multi-shot, crit chance, fire rate, etc. to make a complete build. So yeah, you'll find that the common thread is that most builds initiate with the same three fundamental mods, minus the crit damage if you're doing a status build, but that's, not impressive and less damage. However, building a weapon by itself with a basic build will always feel weaker than ones built around a synergy. And for those advocating for Rivens, no. You can't count Rivens. They're too unreliable due to RNG, weapon disposition, and the high costs often required to get the best ones, making the builds centered around them impossible for everyone to replicate. So what will be a great asset to boost your weapon's damage? Weapon, platform, warframes. Now, what is a weapon platform? In Warframe terms, a weapon platform pretty much refers to a Warframe whose primary role is to enhance or enable the effectiveness of your equipped weapons, rather than relying heavily on its own abilities for direct damage. And in this video, I will showcase some of the best weapon platform Warframes to enhance your weapon builds. These frames will use the two most popular weapon buffing Helminths, Roar and Nourish. Yay! Everybody's favorite! Roar is a universal faction mod, so you never have to put a faction mod on your weapon. So that's a free big damage multiplier. And Nourish pretty much gives your weapons a viral elemental damage mod, without even modding for it. This showcase features the Exceltra as the primary test weapon, and the builds will translate easily to other guns. I won't include melees because melee influence exists, and it outperforms any other melee setup, so no point. Before we get to the frames, if you're in need of a little extra boost when it comes to some crit chance or attack speed, fire rate, you can always rely on some arcanes. You have Arcane Avenger. This will give you a 45% flat crit chance on all your weapons if you take damage. You can easily do this when you're using the Aura Combat Discipline. You don't have to max that Aura, but it's quite nice to have. And because this is a flat crit chance increase, right, it will apply after all your built-up crit chance. Arcane Acceleration for some great fire rates. And if you're working with precision, you have Arcane Rage. You're still better off with the base damage gun arcanes. But this is an option if you just want to push a little extra base damage. So yes, utilize your arcanes depending on the build. Aside from the arcanes, you also have access to your companions. Your companions can offer you two major boons to your weapons: Reinforced Bond and Tenacious Bond. Reinforced Bond grants your weapons fire rate if your companion has shields at 1200 or above, easily done with companions like the Worm Prime or the Nautilus Prime. Nautilus Prime offers you some grouping, the Worm Prime grants you negate for some decent survivability. And Tenacious Bond is a crit damage buff to all your weapons if your companion has crit chance above 50%. Easily done with weapons like Volcox or the Volcock and the Prime Burst Laser. All you need is, of course, crit delay, boom. And Prime Burst Laser, because it's a secondary, you can put in the Augur mods for some survivability, because it converts your energy spent into shields. And as you can see right here, Creeping Bullseye, boom, over 50% crit chance, we get some crit damage. The buffs will look like this. That's Tenacious Bond for the crit damage, and that's Reinforced Bond for the fire rate. Just like that. So if your companion loses shields, you will lose this icon. And to get back those shields, all you have to do is reload your weapon. As you just saw, I reloaded my weapon, my companion got over shields. So reloading your weapon gives your companion shields. I'm starting off with everybody's favorite damage queen, Mirage. What's so cool about Mirage? Well, she has Eclipse. Eclipse is a final weapon damage multiplier. And yes, this can stack with faction damage mods. Unfortunately, you cannot have Eclipse and Roar together because, you know, DE won't allow us, but you can also mod a faction damage mod on your weapon. But we don't need to do that for this showcase. And she also has an augment for her first ability. Her first ability, Hall of Mirrors, will have your clones mimic the damage you're dealing. But then you can also multiply the damage again, thanks to Hall of Malevolence. And because you cannot have Roar with Eclipse, I decided to go with Nourish for this one. I have 2 casting speed because you don't want to slow anything down. It's horrible. And the best shards are duration shards because you definitely want to have your first, third, and Nourish up at all times. And this will translate to her Prism build. Strength. Duration, DPS increase, another DPS increase because everything will have less armor. We focused on a lot of strength here. Strength, 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 and more strength. I did not run Precision Intensify because I want to have equal strength across the board. And I don't want to lose any damage on Eclipse. Hall of Malevolence, again, more damage. And take a look at this. I have Total Eclipse. This will give the benefit of your Eclipse to your allies. Her clones count as allies, so we're double stacking the damage. This is one of the best Mirage weapon platforms out there. And if you're wondering, what about survivability? My guy, you're playing Mirage. You have your first ability. Don't stop moving. And to increase the movement, Amalgam Barrel Diffusion on your secondary, and we're running the Praetos with these 2 evolutions. Now you're going to notice that the Praetos is going to be a staple in a lot of these builds because of the movement. Taking a look at the Exceltra build, this is the base foundation of the Normies build. I already have Viral coming from Nourish, so I decided to go with Corrosive here. And you might be wondering, hey, where's your base damage mod? Well, I don't need a base damage mod because I am using an Arcane to give me base damage. This is Primary Merciless. It's going to give you a lot more base damage than running SARYN. And because the Exceltra is a pseudo AoE weapon, it's got some explosions, we should add something to increase the explosion radius. So let's go with Primed Firestorm. We want to increase our pellet count, we'll add Multi-Shot. Now we're left with 2 mod slots here. This can be anything you want. If I do end up proccing Viral with my Nourish, we got Hunter Munitions. And because I want to be shooting faster, I can add some fire rate with Speed Trigger. We don't want to add Prime Shred because it bugs out the explosions, and your explosion will go through the floor. It's some DE coding. And to increase our critical tier and also some ammo economy, we have the Vigilante Supplies. That's pretty much a simple build right there. Now let's test this against enemies. Ooh. That looks very bad. Where's the damage? We barely killed anything and we didn't stack anything up. So let's increase our damage. I'll be using Madurai here with 2 Void Slings. Press the first ability. Eclipse. Uru. Oh my god. Just like that. Look at how our damage spiked. And we're going to increase that damage even further because we're stacking up Primary Merciless. So now, it's even more damage. I'm not even finishing my clip now.
And I'm sorry to be that guy, this is like the grammar police of guns. You absolute buffoon. What you have there is not clips. These are mags. The same way that this is also a mag. They're all mags. Stop saying clips, you look fucking stupid here.
And now we move on to CHROMA. The reason why we're using CHROMA here is because of his Vex armor. It gives us base damage. For those who don't know, Fury, one of the 2 buffs you get from Vex armor, increases all of your weapons' base damage. This means you don't have to mod base damage on your weapons. Now that means you have a free mod slot and a free arcane slot as well to put anything else. And because Roar doesn't work with Vex armor, again, you run Nourish. Free elemental damage. So for the Archon shards, you have 2 options. Run full red shards to give you strength, or run full purple shards to give you electric elemental damage on your primary. And because I don't want to run primary only for this, I went with the strength increase because it's more universal. And red shards are a lot easier to do than purple shards. Build very simple. Combat Discipline, you deal damage, you kill enemies, you deal damage to yourself, which will trigger Arcane Avenger, which gives you a flat 45% crit chance on all your weapons. Arcane Guardian, you take some damage, you get some armor instead. This is a base Steel Path build, and Health Tanky is going to go a long way. And for his Elemental Ward, I'll be going with the red buff to give me more health, so we can get a decent amount of health, we have some armor, we have adaptation, so that's your survivability. And over here we have Guardian Armor. This will help us maintain our Vex armor so we don't have to recast it all the time. And that's primarily the only reason I'm using that. Now for the Exceltra build, we're pretty much sticking with same thing. For the Arcanes, we have a few options. If you land a weak point hit, you get some ammo efficiency. Pretty good, and increases your status chance, so that's great. Fractalized Reset, this increases the reload speed of your weapon when you cast an ability. And Nourish is a pretty spammable ability, so we can use this. And Primary Exhilarate on weapon impact status effect, you get energy regen. And Exceltra easily triggers impact, but we're going to go with Fractalized Reset. So if you want, you can definitely go with Speed Trigger, yet again, for more fire rate. And if you want, again, you can run Hunter Munitions, but you can also run, and because Chroma is a bit more tanky, you have some time to aim down sights. So if you want, you could go for more crit damage with bladed rounds. This will definitely improve your damage output. You already know how bad the weapon is when it comes to having no damage. Spawn enemies. You get all that red crit because of Arcane Avenger. We built up our base damage by killing enemies. Pretty good. We're back with the Exceltra. I'm going to do one more extra funny build for Chroma. This is going to be really quick. Just let's move this here. Go to Actions. Click Swap Polarity. Do boom boom. There you go. And move this up here. Now we have Corrosive. But why do we do this? Well, because I want to be running cold Rhyme rounds. We're going to run a 60-60 just to give us some status chance so we can trigger the cold status effect. Why do we want the cold status effect? It's because we can use the Arcane Primary Frostbite. This grants our weapons crit damage and multi-shot if our weapon triggers the cold status effect. Because we have Arcane Avenger, that's a lot of crit chance. And for those who don't like to aim down sights using the Bladed Rounds mod, you can run this route as well. And having Corrosive Cold is also a good way for you to deal extra damage because cold gives you innate crit damage. Not only that, and the cold status effect slows down enemies and can potentially freeze them. Without any buffing, right, we're going to shoot. We triggered cold on enemies, and you can see on the top right, boom, 9 stacks of Frostbite. And enemies are slowed, and because Exceltra is somewhat of an AoE weapon, I don't necessarily have to worry about maintaining stacks with this Arcane. Boom. 40 stacks already, and we're dealing a lot more damage. There you go. Here we have RHINO. RHINO is going to be a very early frame you get, but you're better off getting the RHINO Prime because then you can get rid of the regular RHINO to give Roar to all your other Warframes. The cool thing about RHINO is that he can run both Nourish and Roar. Now if you're thinking, hey, what about Grendel? You know, we don't talk about Grendel because Nourish is just better on any other Warframe than the Warframe it came from. Great design choice, by the way. Roar, your universal damage multiplier, which also functions as a faction damage multiplier. And the other thing about Roar is that it multiplies your damage over time, so you'll deal 2 times the damage. Hence the term double dipping. Nourish, free viral elemental damage on your weapons. And that's about it. For the Archon shards, 2 casting speed because don't let animations shine. And strength shards. The weapon build is pretty much similar, as you can see, and depending how you're going to play, you can change and put whatever you want. For the RHINO build, we got Growing Power. For some more strength, if you want to swap this up to Corrosive Projection, you can do so. And as you can see, we focused on a lot of strength here. We went with Fiber and Intensify because Iron Skin does scale off armor as well. And the Arcanes, Battery for a lot of energy, and Nourish just replenishes our energy. With our buff stacked, you can see Roar, Nourish, popping off. And having both Corrosive and Viral is insanely great to have on a lot of builds. So we covered RHINO, Mirage, and Chroma. They're kind of basic. Let's go into the more obscure setups when it comes to elemental damage buffing. And why not start off with SARYN? SARYN has Toxic Lash. Now this ability is friggin' broken. It is a guaranteed toxin proc. It doesn't scale off your status chance at all. So as long as you have this active, you will proc toxin regardless of your weapon's status chance. It is a weapon buff, as it coats your weapons with the toxin element. It scales off the toxin elements on your weapons, and it also scales off elemental damage mods on your weapons. Not only that, it scales with strength and faction damage multipliers. So if you have something like Roar, it will allow this ability to triple dip in damage because of the way it applies its damage. Because scaling off a portion of your weapon's damage, elemental damage, and applying its toxin damage over time. Because this is a weapon platform, Spores is not going to be used in a traditional sense. We're applying Venom Dose to our weapons. That's a free corrosive damage on our weapons. So Venom Dose buffs our weapon, and Toxic Lash buffs our weapon, for then our weapon to buff Toxic Lash. And then we apply Roar to buff the weapon, for then Roar to also buff Toxic Lash. So we deal more damage. You see how that works? Fantastic. The Archon shards, I have 1 strength shard, and I have electric shards. Just 2 electric shards here, and the other 2 are for equilibrium, pretty much. Taking a look at the SARYN build, I have combat discipline here at rank 1, just for Arcane Avenger. That's pretty much it. This is going to be a shield regen build, so that's why we have Prime Redirection, Fast Deflection, and Vigilante Vigor. Large shield pool and fast shield recharge, and reducing its shield recharge delay. And because this is a weapon platform build, right, we don't have to worry about range. It's just here for buffing our weapons. Venom Dose for the corrosive elemental damage on our weapons. Narrow-minded and Prime Continuity just for the duration. And she doesn't need anything like Rolling Guard because her second ability will completely cleanse us of status effects. On top of that, we'll also utilize our Companion. And also really nice to use when you're trying to reload your weapon. And of course, divert enemy fire. Now, the range here does not affect its aggro radius, but it only affects its explosion radius. We don't have to worry about the explosion radius. The aggro radius is way more important. Not only does it aggro enemies for us and cleanses of status effects, but it also gives us a movement speed multiplier. So, we're zooming. Blind Rage and Precision Intensify for our strength. Blind Rage is an overall strength increase, and because of that 1 strength shard, we are on 200% strength. And Molt Augmented gives us another boost to our strength. And Precision Intensify buffs our 4th ability, which happens to be Roar, so we deal more damage. This is a very comfy build that's allowing us to do a lot of damage. Because we already have Corrosive, Guaranteed Toxin procs, and a Faction Damage Multiplier, our build is going to be slightly different. Now, this is the Exceltra build. Notice we're not using a base damage mod, but I'm running Primary Blight. Because of Toxic Lash, I have Guaranteed Toxin damage procs, so I gain crit damage and multi-shot with this arcane. Then I can just run a base damage mod here instead. I have viral instead of corrosive, crit chance, crit damage, and prime magazine warp, so we have a large magazine of 74. You can definitely run prime cryo rounds to give you a large boost to your damage if you want, and having a lot of elemental damage will also buff Toxic Lash. So let's see how this build looks like without the buffs. This is how it looks like. See, we're dealing viral and electric. Let's just buff Toxic Lash. Now we have Guaranteed Toxin procs, and look at the top, already at times 40. We killed an enemy, we're buffing our Galvanized Chamber, and we triggered Arcane Avenger, so we have more crits. See, we're getting some red crits here and there. This is just with Toxic Lash, by the way. All right, let's add Corrosive to the mix. Now, because this is a combined element, our bonus electric will not combine with the corrosive from Venom Dose. You can see we still are doing electric right there, but we also have corrosive damage. We're already dealing a lot more damage because of the bonus corrosive. Now let's add a faction damage multiplier, which will take Toxic Lash to the next level. Here we go, boys. Oh, they're just dying from the damage over time. See? All right, we didn't even shoot our full magazine. All that because of the damage over time. And right after SARYN, we have Site 09, Mr. Clyde himself. So he has something similar to SARYN when it comes to Toxic Lash, but it doesn't work the same. His second ability, Resupply. The great thing about this ability is that it offers you an infinite supply of ammo. Get it? Because it's in the name. But it also grants you any elemental combination that you want. That is, of course, available through modding. On top of this elemental damage buff, the elemental status effects that it applies are guaranteed procs. If you hold down the ability, you get your selector. And right now I picked Corrosive, but if I want, I can switch to, of course, Randomize, Blast, or whatever. So let's say we want Heat. Right now I already have Corrosive, as you can see right there, but I have the Heat buff active. So I have to shoot, pick up the Heat for it to be overwritten. With Heat buff, Again, I'm burning enemies. There is electricity right there. So let's pick up electricity. And now we have guaranteed electric. And the elemental damage over time will also scale off your elemental damage on your weapons. So for example, if you pick, let's say, heat or electricity, and you have heat or electric on your weapon, you will deal more heat or electric damage over time. Think of it like that. I have 3 strength shards here because this is an overall sight build, moving between the sniper build and a weapon platform. The unfortunate part is we don't have Archon shard loadouts. And for the other 2 shards are going to be my electric shards. I have the Nourish Helminth. Unfortunately, you cannot run Roar with his second ability, and I'll rather have his second ability right here, paired with Nourish. And because we already have Viral through Nourish, I can do any other elemental combination that I want. So let's take a look at this Sight 09 build. With the Arcanes, I have both Molt Augmented and Crepulskor. Crepulskor gives you crit damage and strength while you're invisible, which works with Evade. To refresh Evade, you need to get some headshots. So there's that. Cross Projection in the Aura for some negative armor. You could run Camaraderie if you're, trying to aim at enemies' heads all the time. Now let's take a look at the Exultra build, which is going to be a bit odd because we have quite a lot of free space on this particular build. Because of the electric Archon shards, I have innate electric on my primary weapon. That means if I want to go with corrosive, I can just put 1 mod, and now I have corrosive. And with Nourish, I have viral and corrosive. That means my second ability can be whatever elemental combination I want. In the Arcane, I can actually run Primary Blight just like SARYN, because I can give myself Toxin. Not only that, I can do the other variation of it. Not only do we have a free slot, we can also run a faction damage mod right here. So let's say I'm fighting against the Orokin. We can also run the faction damage mod. So we have Nourish, we have Roar, we have any elemental combination we want. And let's say I don't want to run Primary Blight or Frostbite, and I still want to have a decent amount of base damage. I can also remove this, and now I can run Primary Merciless. But now we have 2 free slots yet again. You see how this is working when you're using your Warframe? I can run Prime Magazine Warp, so I can shoot longer. And yes, so if I want more crit damage, I can run Bladed Rounds. That's free crit damage. And if I want to bleed enemies, I can always run Hunter Munition. You see, we have so much freedom right now. Let's say we're using our invisibility quite a lot. I don't have to worry too much about this Arcane right there. And we can use Spectral Serration. That's 330 base damage while invisible. Not bad, right? And that means I can run any other Arcane I want. You see, you have decent amount of freedom right here. So you know what? Let's go with Primary Frostbite. So, Nourish, you can pop your first ability. You see, we don't have any buff on the top right corner. We can press our third ability. Now we have Spectral Serration active. We'll pick the cold element. Look at that. Press the second ability to instantly reload our weapon. And we have a large magazine, so we can keep on firing forever. So this is up to you. If you're not too keen on running this, you can always, drop it, drop that, and run whatever you want here, whatever. Let's say this is Bladed Rounds. Let's do electric or heat. If you run heat, it's going to be a lot harder to get headshots. There you go. Of course, if you want heat, you can do heat. Again, it's going to be a lot harder to hit headshots with heat. But heat and corrosive, really nice to give you more damage. Another great option of a weapon platform is HARROW. HARROW has this Covenant. Covenant grants you crit chance to all your guns. And of course, you deal more crit when you hit headshots. And not only that, it's a great survivability tool. I replaced this throwable with Nourish because swinging a throwable is a complete waste of time. I do not know why we have to waste our time doing that. And this way, he can actually be a support to your team, but by providing them viral and an energy multiplier. His second ability is also one of his best abilities. Not only does it, heal, but it grants you fire rate, attack speed, reload speed, which buffs a lot of weapons. Weapons like the CHROMA, which have horrible reload speed. So, Penance completely fixes its issue with reload speed. So let's unpause enemies because we need to take damage with our fourth ability. Take damage, Nourish, hit ourselves. When we're out of our Covenant, we have, look at that, red crits. Look at that. Amazing. I know this is not the Xceltra, but I just wanted to showcase weapons that have horrible reload speed. Now that's with penance. Do you see how fast that was? Now let's see that without penance. Ooh. Ooh, you have to suffer through that? Disgusting. That's why we use HARROW with this gun. I will not use this gun unless it's on HARROW or Gus. For the Archon shards, yeah, just 2 casting speed because, again, this has an animation, which is annoying. So you can also use Matter and the 2 casting speed. A bit faster right there, right? Here's another trick people don't know. If you do this, you can just animation cancel. Just like that. That's one way to do it. So let's take a look at the build on this guy. Arcane Avenger, well, easy. And max combat discipline, we don't care because we have penance. This heals us. So we can run a max rank 1. Avenger giving us flat crit, acceleration for even more fire rate, even though we have penance. Penance, fire rate, acceleration, fire rate. We don't have to worry about reload speed or anything like that, right? We're chilling. However, if you're running weapons that, are not great in the ammo economy, swap this out for anything else. For example, Molt Augmented. Molt Augmented will definitely benefit Nourish quite a lot. And Rolling Guard for some iframes, especially when you dodge roll and then cast your second ability. And then immediately follow up with your first ability. You'll have enough time to replenish your shields and be invulnerable during that process. So let's see this in action. So dodge roll and first ability. You see, we have shields back, and we were invulnerable during that whole period. And the weapon build pretty much similar to what I was running on Mirage and RHINO. So these are my top picks when it comes to weapon platforms. Of course, there are other frames like Wisp. She gives you some fire rate, not so bad, right? You have Ash with his invisibility and Augment. You get some crit chance, and you just pump on Roar on the 4th ability. Run Precision Intensify. You're chilling, not so bad. Hydroid, bootleg SARYN, doable. You also have Valence Formation here, aka Lavos. With that augment, give yourself guaranteed, similar to what Sight 09 can do. But Sight 09 is way more flexible and offers a lot more. Valence Formation, if you want to do melees, not so bad. Other unique ones are something like Zephyr, but she's a bit more complicated and offers a different playstyle. Volt, just melee influence Andy. Sure, he has a shield, and you get some more crit damage when you shoot through the shield, but you have other frames that just do it a lot easier and don't have to worry about that. And of course, Johnny Sins here, aka Gus. Pretty much similar to HARROW, but he requires you to build up these buffs. He's a jack of all trades, all-rounder. He doesn't really have a specialty. He can pretty much do quite a lot, so it depends what you want to do. Then finally, you have Mag. Mag is a peculiar one, especially when it comes to her bubbles. She doesn't really offer anything else, but more about debuffing enemies with her bubble. Lesson of the day, when you're building your weapon, build it around the frame you're using. You have access to Omniforma now. Every weapon requires at least 3 Omniforma if you want a completely flexible weapon build. Otherwise, folks, that has been it from me. I do hope you enjoyed and learned something from this video. If you did, please feel free to leave a like, share, and subscribe for more Warframe content, streams, and so much more. Do refer to the description. Thanks for watching, and as always, peace. Bye-bye now.